Picture a school bus. Not just any bus, a bright yellow one. Now try to imagine it painted black, or dark blue, or forest green. Feels wrong. Not because yellow is the only color it could be, but because somewhere along the way, your brain decided that school buses are supposed to be yellow. Here's the strange part. That wasn't always true. There was a time when school buses came in just about every color you could imagine. So why did nearly every school bus in America eventually become the exact same shade of yellow? The answer involves a room full of educators, a surprising amount of science, and one color that's far better at protecting children than you might think. Language has a habit of making traditions feel older than they really are. Sometimes we assume something has always been a certain way, simply because we've never known anything different. School buses are a perfect example. When you think about it, school buses are a little unusual. We don't standardize the color of family cars. Fire trucks weren't always red. Delivery vans come in every imaginable design. But school buses? They're almost identical. Whether you're in California, Maine, Texas, or Alaska, one glance is usually enough. You instantly know what you're looking at. That kind of consistency doesn't happen by accident. In fact, if you traveled back to the early 1900s, you'd probably struggle to recognize a school bus at all. Some look like horse-drawn wagons. Others were little more than wooden carts with benches. As automobiles became more common, schools began converting trucks into buses. Every manufacturer did things a little differently. Different sizes, different shapes, different colors. Some buses were gray, others were blue, white, green, even red. There was no universal standard because no one had ever stopped to ask an important question. If the purpose of a school bus is to carry children safely, what color should make it the easiest to notice? By the 1930s, school transportation was becoming a much bigger part of American life. More children were riding buses than ever before. Roads were getting busier, cars were getting faster, and that meant safety mattered more than ever. So in 1939, a professor named Frank Sire decided it was time to fix the problem. If you've never heard of Frank Sire, you're not alone. But millions of children have benefited from his work without ever knowing his name. Sire was an education professor who specialized in rural schools. He noticed that school transportation was wildly inconsistent across the country. Some buses held 20 students, others held 60. Emergency exits weren't standardized, neither were seat layouts. Even the paint color changed from district to district. So he organized a conference unlike anything anyone had attempted before. Representatives from every state gathered at Teachers College at Columbia University. Engineers, educators, school officials, manufacturers. For 7 days they debated dozens of standards that would eventually shape the modern school bus. Everything from construction to safety was discussed, but one conversation became surprisingly memorable. What color should the buses be? At first, that might sound like one of the least important decisions in the room. It turned out to be one of the most important. Think about driving at sunrise, or sunset, or through rain, or a thick layer of morning fog. Some colors simply disappear into the background. Dark blue blends into shadows, green melts into trees, gray fades into the road itself. Yellow behaves differently. Human eyes are especially sensitive to yellow during daylight. It's one of the first colors we notice in our peripheral vision. Even before you're looking directly at something yellow, your brain often notices it. That's exactly what you want when children are stepping on and off a bus. Drivers don't even have to search for it. Their attention is naturally pulled toward it. But there was another reason. One that's even more interesting. Black lettering is incredibly easy to read against a yellow background. That means signs like school bus remain visible from further away than they would on many other colors. And when you're traveling at highway speed, every extra fraction of a second matters. A driver who recognizes a bus just 1 second earlier has significantly more time to slow down. Sometimes safety isn't about dramatic inventions. Sometimes it's about making sure people notice something just a little sooner. After days of discussion, the conference reached a decision. Not just yellow, a very specific yellow. The official name today is National School Bus Glossy Yellow. It has a slightly orange tint compared to a bright lemon yellow. Why? Because pure yellow can become almost blinding in direct sunlight. Adding a bit of orange helps maintain visibility in different weather and lighting conditions. It's a tiny adjustment, but tiny adjustments are often what make good engineering. Here's what surprised me the most. The decision wasn't based on tradition. There wasn't some ancient rule that children like yellow. No one picked it because it looked cheerful. In fact, the tradition came afterward. Today, we associate yellow with school buses because decades of children grew up seeing them. The color didn't become iconic first. It became iconic because it proved practical. That's a subtle but important difference. It's easy to assume things are done a certain way because that's just how they've always been. Often, they've always been that way because someone carefully tested a better idea. And once that better idea worked, everyone copied it. That's exactly what happened here. Over time, manufacturers adopted the new standard. States adopted the standard. School districts followed. Eventually, seeing a yellow school bus became so ordinary that almost nobody questioned it anymore. But here's something you may not have noticed. Yellow isn't only used for school buses. Construction equipment often uses bright yellows. Warning signs frequently use yellow. Road hazards, caution tape, pedestrian crossing signs, even many emergency vehicles include yellow reflective markings. They're all trying to accomplish the same thing. Not to look pretty, to be seen. Color is actually one of the simplest safety tools we have. Without saying a single word, it can quietly tell your brain, pay attention. What's fascinating is that your brain is constantly making these decisions without asking for permission. You don't consciously analyze every object while driving. Your brain filters information automatically. Certain colors move to the front of the line. Others fade into the background. That tiny advantage can make an enormous difference when children are involved. It also explains something else. Have you ever noticed that even from far away, before you can read the words, before you can see the flashing lights, you already know it's a school bus? That's not an accident. That is decades of thoughtful design working exactly as intended. The next time one stops in front of you, or you find yourself waiting as children climb aboard, take another look at that familiar yellow paint. It isn't there because someone thought it looked nice. It isn't there because that's simply what school buses have always looked like. It's there because decades ago, a room full of people asked a surprisingly simple question. What color gives children the best chance of being seen? The answer has been quietly protecting generations ever since. Sometimes the safest ideas aren't the loudest ones. Sometimes they're painted in a color you stop noticing, until someone reminds you to look. Stay curious, friends.